My son broke my finger over money. Not because I stole from him, but because I refused to risk losing everything I owned for a house he couldn't afford. I'm Nancy Richardson, 52 years old, and I built my life from nothing. Food stamps as a kid, eviction notices, welfare lines. I swore when I had my son Michael he'd never know that struggle. I worked 3 jobs putting him through Stanford, climbed from secretary to regional sales director, and bought my house in Sacramento paid in cash. Every sacrifice was for him. He married Brittany 3 years ago. Beautiful girl, designer, everything always perfectly put together. From the start something felt off. The way she'd look at my 1,200 square foot home like it embarrassed her, how she'd mention their friends' mothers who bought them cars and paid for vacations. Michael changed after the wedding. Fewer calls, shorter visits. When we did talk, Brittany controlled everything. Then came that Sunday in October. I made pot roast, Michael's favorite since childhood. The moment they walked in, I knew something was coming. Michael wouldn't look at me. Brittany had this tight smile. Over dessert, she set down her fork and said they'd found their dream home. 4 bedrooms in Los Gatos. $750,000. They just needed me to co-sign the mortgage. My chest tightened. I told them I couldn't do that because if they defaulted, I'd lose everything. Michael insisted they wouldn't default, that he made good money. I asked why they needed a co-signer then. Silence. Brittany admitted they had some credit card debt, student loans, car payments. The kind of debt that makes banks nervous, about $750,000. I apologized but said I couldn't risk my home and retirement. Brittany's face went cold. She called me selfish, said I spent money on his education but wouldn't invest in their future. I told them they needed to leave. Michael stood and I saw pure fury in his eyes. He said after everything I'd done for him, after reminding him every day what I sacrificed, here was my chance to actually help, and I was saying no. Brittany grabbed her purse and told me I had until Friday to change my mind. They left. I stood in my kitchen shaking, surrounded by cold food. I told myself he'd calm down, that we'd talk. He was my son, my good boy. I had no idea what Friday would bring. The week crawled by like torture. No calls from Michael. My texts went unanswered. Wednesday, Brittany messaged saying they were still waiting and not to make them lose their dream because I was being difficult. Thursday, Michael finally called asking me to please just think about it. I told him I couldn't guarantee $750,000, asked what would happen if he lost his job. He got angry, asked why I couldn't trust him. I explained it wasn't about trust but about reality, that banks require co-signers because the risk is real. After a long silence, he asked if that was my final answer. I said yes. He hung up without saying goodbye. Friday afternoon, I was in my garden when his Mercedes pulled up. He was alone. Thank God, I thought maybe we could finally talk this through like adults. He walked toward me with measured steps, and something about his body language made me set down my shears. I started to suggest we sit down and talk, but he cut me off saying he needed me to sign papers. He pulled out loan documents. I told him I'd already said no. His voice went flat as he repeated that I needed to sign them. I refused. He stepped closer and asked if I had any idea what I was doing to his marriage. That Brittany's family thought he couldn't provide for her, all because his own mother wouldn't help. I told him that was manipulation, asked if he couldn't see that. His jaw clenched as he ordered me again to sign the papers. I said I wouldn't. Then he grabbed my right hand. His fingers wrapped around mine like a vice. He said through gritted teeth that I was going to sign. I gasped, tried to pull away, told him he was hurting me. Then he bent my index finger backward. There was a snap like a twig breaking. The pain was blinding and I screamed. He let go and I fell to my knees, cradling my hand. My finger was already swelling, bent at an unnatural angle. Michael stood over me, breathing hard, staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. He started to say something about not meaning to, that it was an accident. I told him to get away from me. He claimed it was an accident, that I'd pulled away. I sobbed that he'd broken my finger because I wouldn't sign papers. He backed away, still holding those loan documents, and said he'd call me later when I'd calmed down. Like I was the problem. Like I was being hysterical. He got in his car and drove away, leaving me alone in my garden with a broken finger and a shattered heart. I don't know how long I sat there in my garden. The pain was excruciating, but worse was the disbelief. My son had hurt me deliberately over money. Finally, I managed to get inside and called my neighbor Ruth. She was there in 3 minutes and drove me to the emergency room. The whole drive she kept asking what happened, but I couldn't say it out loud yet. At the ER they took x-rays showing a clean break. They splinted it, gave me pain medication and discharge papers. The nurse, a woman about my age with kind eyes, asked quietly how it happened. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I fell, to say it was an accident. But then I saw my reflection in the window, 52 years old, wearing a splint with a face streaked with tears. And I thought about every woman I'd ever known who made excuses for people who hurt them. I whispered that my son did it, that my son broke my finger. 20 minutes later, a police officer was taking my statement. Detective Marcus Webb from the Assault Division. Saying the words out loud made it real in a way that terrified me. He asked if I felt safe going home that night. Safe in the house I'd lived in for 12 years. The question shouldn't have made sense, but it did. I thought about Michael's face in that moment, the rage, how quickly he'd switched from my son to someone I didn't recognize. I told the detective I didn't know. He explained they could request a temporary restraining order that would be in place by morning. A restraining order against my own child. That night my phone was filled with messages. 17 from Brittany, 3 from Michael. Around 2 in the morning Michael called. He asked what I'd done, said the police had just called him about pressing charges. I told him he broke my finger. He insisted it was an accident, that I'd pulled away. I told him to stop lying, that he grabbed my hand and bent my finger back until it snapped because I wouldn't give him $750,000. Silence on the other end. Then he asked if I had any idea what this would do to his job, his reputation, that Brittany's family already thought certain things. I said I didn't care what Brittany's family thought, that he'd hurt me, his mother, over a house. He apologized and asked me to drop the charges, said we could work this out as a family. Work it out as a family, like this was a disagreement over Thanksgiving plans. I told him there was a restraining order being filed tomorrow and not to contact me again. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, Detective Webb returned with a female officer who took photos of my hand from every angle. The bruising had spread up my arm, deep purple and yellow. He told me they'd served Michael with the restraining order and he wasn't to come within 500 feet of me or my property. Over the next week, messages found ways through. Brittany created new numbers, new email addresses. Each message more desperate than the last. She said the tech company had fired him, that they were going to lose their apartment, that this was elder abuse and they'd sue me. I saved every message like Detective Webb told me to. Then 8 days after it happened, an envelope arrived hand-delivered on my porch. Inside was a letter in Michael's handwriting. He wrote that he knew he wasn't supposed to contact me, but he needed me to understand that he'd lost everything. His job, his reputation, Brittany's respect. All because I couldn't trust my own son. He said I'd raised him to be better than this, then treated him like a criminal over one moment of frustration. He claimed he never meant to hurt me, but that I meant to hurt him when I called the police. That I'd chosen the system over family and he'd never forgive me for that. I read it 3 times and each time I felt smaller, weaker. Was he right? Had I overreacted? I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. She said flatly that he broke my finger and now he's mad at me, told me to listen to myself, that I sounded like those women on crime shows who take back abusive husbands. I protested that he wasn't abusive, he was my son. She said he put his hands on me in anger and that's abuse. She didn't care if he was my son, my husband, or the Pope. After we hung up, I looked at the letter again, really looked at it. Not once did he say he was wrong. Not once did he take real responsibility. Every sentence was about what I'd done to him, how I'd hurt him, how I'd ruined his life. A man who breaks his mother's finger and then makes himself the victim. That night I finally read all of Brittany's messages, really read them. In one she'd written that he told her what I said about their debt, that I had no right to throw that in his face, that they were building a life and sometimes that means carrying balances. Something clicked. I got on my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I searched for their social media, which I'd always avoided because it felt like spying. Their Instagram was public. Photos from the last 6 months showed Cabo in January, a Napa Valley wine tour in March, Hawaii in June, New York in August. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants. A Tesla had appeared 3 months ago. Each trip, each purchase tagged with hashtags about living their best life, being blessed, luxury lifestyle. They were drowning in debt, living like millionaires, and they'd wanted me to guarantee their next big purchase. I scrolled further back. 2 years ago the photos were simpler. Hiking home-cooked meals. They looked genuinely happy then. Then Brittany's college roommate started appearing. Jessica Hartwell married to some tech executive with a mansion in Atherton and a private jet. After Jessica showed up, everything changed. Suddenly their modest tech couple life wasn't enough. They needed more, bigger, better. And when they couldn't afford it, they came to me. I closed the laptop feeling sick. My son hadn't just broken my finger. He'd broken something deeper, the trust that a parent is supposed to have in their child, the belief that love matters more than money. 2 weeks after the incident, the district attorney called. Patricia Flores wanted to discuss Michael's case. He'd been charged with assault and battery, and his lawyer was pushing for a plea deal with anger management classes, probation, no jail time. She asked how I felt about that. I asked if he'd have a record. She said yes, a misdemeanor conviction. A record. My son with a criminal record. I asked if I could think about it. She said of course, but that in her 15 years doing this job, she'd seen a lot of family violence and it almost never happens just once. The fact that he hurt me over money showed no real remorse and his wife was harassing me, these were all red flags. After she hung up, I sat with that thought. It almost never happens just once. The anger surprised me. I'd spent 3 weeks crying, questioning myself, wondering if I'd overreacted. Then one morning I woke up furious. My son had assaulted me and was playing victim. His wife was harassing me. And I was the one hiding in my house, afraid to answer the phone. I was done hiding. I called Patricia Flores back and told her I wanted to move forward with prosecution, no plea deal. There was a pause before she asked if I was certain, explaining this would likely go to trial and I'd have to testify against my son in open court. I told her I was certain. That afternoon my doorbell rang. Through the window I saw a woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s, nervous, looking over her shoulder. I opened the door with the chains still on. She introduced herself as Amanda Chin and said she needed to talk to me about my son. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on my couch with her hands twisting in her lap and told me she worked with Michael, or had worked with him, and that she'd heard about what happened. The whole office knew. She said she needed me to know something because she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Michael wasn't fired just because of the arrest. He was already under investigation by HR. 3 women including her had filed complaints about his behavior over the past 8 months. I asked what kind of behavior. She described anger issues, how he'd thrown a laptop across the conference room when a project got rejected, screamed at an intern until she cried, punched a hole in the wall of the break room. HR had given him warnings, mandated anger management, but it kept escalating. She looked at me directly and said when they heard he'd hurt me, none of them were surprised. They were just sad it had gotten that far. After she left, I sat in silence. How had I not known? But then how would I? He'd stopped visiting months ago. Our phone calls had been brief, surface level. I'd been mourning the loss of a son who'd already been gone. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early November. Patricia prepared me for what to expect, explaining his lawyer would try to paint this as a misunderstanding, that I'd pulled away and the injury was accidental. My job was to tell the truth clearly and calmly. I asked what would happen if I broke down. She said then I'd break down, that I was a mother testifying against her son and no one expected me to be stoic. The night before the hearing, Brittany sent one final message saying tomorrow I was going to stand in court and lie about a man who loved me his entire life, that I was going to destroy him because I was bitter and lonely and couldn't stand that he had a wife now, that everyone saw through me and I was pathetic. I didn't block this number. Instead I forwarded the message to Patricia and Detective Webb. The courthouse was smaller than I expected, cold and institutional. Ruth insisted on coming with me. She whispered that I didn't have to look at him, to just look at the judge. But when they brought Michael in, I couldn't help it. He'd lost weight, his suit hung loose on his frame, dark circles under his eyes. For a split second I saw my little boy and my heart broke all over again. Then Brittany walked in and sat directly behind him, staring at me with pure hatred. The hearing was brief. The judge reviewed the medical reports, the police photographs, the witness statements. Michael's lawyer argued it was an accident, a regrettable moment during a family disagreement. Patricia presented the pattern, the workplace complaints, the harassment messages from Brittany, the financial motive. She told the judge this wasn't a family disagreement but assault with intent to coerce, that Michael wanted me to co-sign a loan worth $750,000, and when I refused he broke my finger. Then his wife spent 3 weeks harassing me, trying to pressure me into dropping charges. This showed a pattern of using intimidation and violence to get what they want. The judge set a trial date for January, 2 months away. As we filed out, Brittany blocked my path in the hallway and hissed that this wasn't over, that they were going to sue me for everything: defamation, emotional distress, elder abuse, and I'd lose my precious house anyway. Detective Webb appeared beside me and asked if I'd like to file a report for witness intimidation. Brittany's face went white and she hurried away. In the parking lot I finally broke down. Ruth held me while I sobbed that I thought I'd raised him better than this. She said firmly that I did raise him to be better, but what he became after that was his choice. I started seeing Dr. Sarah Kim, a therapist specializing in family trauma. In our first session she asked me one question that broke me open. She asked what I was really grieving, the son I had or the son I thought I had. I couldn't answer through the tears. She explained that the son I thought I had, the grateful, loving boy, might never have existed outside my imagination. Children perform for their parents, show them what they want to see. Michael showed me the good son because that's what got him what he needed. College paid for, support, approval. And when I set a condition he didn't like, refusing to co-sign, the performance ended. What I saw that day in my garden was who he really was when he didn't get what he wanted. The truth of that sat heavy in my chest. January came fast and the trial began. Patricia reminded me to answer only what was asked, not to elaborate or get defensive, that the facts spoke for themselves. Michael's lawyer, Robert Castellano, told the jury this was a case about a tragic family misunderstanding, a mother and son who loved each other who had a disagreement about money, and in a moment of stress an accident occurred. He said Michael Richardson wasn't a criminal, he was a son who made a mistake. Patricia stood and said this wasn't about a misunderstanding but about violence used as coercion. The defendant wanted his mother to guarantee a $750,000 loan. She said no, he broke her finger. The evidence would show a clear pattern of when Michael Richardson doesn't get what he wants, he becomes violent. Detective Webb testified first, walking the jury through the initial report and photographs. Amanda Chin testified about the workplace violence, the thrown laptop, the screaming, the broken wall. When asked what her reaction was when she heard he'd injured his mother, she looked right at Michael and said she wasn't surprised, just sad. Then it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through water. Patricia asked me to tell the jury about October 15th. I took a breath and told them about the dinner, the request, my refusal, the anger. I described how he came to my house that Friday with loan documents, how I said no, how he grabbed my hand and bent my finger backward until it broke. Patricia asked if it was an accident. I said no, he was looking right at me when he did it. She showed the jury the photographs of my purple swollen hand, the x-rays showing the clean break. Then Castellano cross-examined me. He asked if I loved my son. I said I did. He established that raising him alone must have been hard, then asked if I ever felt Michael owed me something for all those sacrifices. I saw where he was going and said no, I chose to have him and that was my responsibility. He pointed out that I did mention those sacrifices to Michael sometimes though, didn't I? I admitted sometimes yes. He said when Michael asked me to co-sign this loan, I refused even though I had the credit and means to help my only child achieve his dream. Patricia objected that this was argumentative and the judge sustained it, but I could see doubt on some jurors' faces. Castellano asked if it was possible that when I pulled away from my son, that's when my finger was injured, that it was truly accidental. I said I didn't pull away until he'd already grabbed me. He pressed asking if I did pull away. I said yes because he was hurting me. He said so there was a struggle. I responded that he grabbed me and I tried to get free. That's not a struggle, that's assault. Michael took the stand and testified he never intended to hurt me, that he loved me and just wanted to talk to me about the loan. He said he was frustrated, reached for my hand to make a connection. I jerked away and he heard something snap and felt horrible. When asked what happened to his life after the incident, his voice broke as he described losing everything, his job, his wife moving out, having to move in with his brother in Oakland, seeing a therapist for depression, all because of a terrible accident. Several jurors looked sympathetic and I felt sick. But Patricia's cross-examination was surgical. She asked why he brought loan documents if he just wanted to talk. She held up the medical photos and pointed out that the force required to break a finger this way is substantial, asking if that sounded like an accident from someone jerking away. She went through his workplace behavior, each violent incident, and he kept claiming things slipped or were accidents or that he was having a bad day. Patricia stepped closer and said he seemed to have a lot of accidents and bad days that ended with other people getting hurt. Wasn't that true? His lawyer objected and she withdrew the question. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they finally called us back, my legs barely worked. The four women stood and said, in the matter of the People versus Michael Richardson, on the charge of assault and battery, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I heard a sob and realized it was coming from me. Michael dropped his head into his hands. Outside, Patricia hugged me and said I did it. I held him accountable. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. My son had just been convicted of assault against me. There was no winning in this situation, only different kinds of loss. The sentencing hearing was brief. Judge Morrison gave Michael 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management, and a permanent restraining order keeping him 500 feet from me. No jail time. Part of me was relieved. Part of me wondered if he'd learned anything at all. He didn't look at me when the sentence was read, just nodded, signed papers and left with his lawyer. 2 days later I received a thick envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a civil lawsuit. Brittany and Michael were suing me for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and damages totaling $500,000. My new lawyer Grace Tomlin read through it and laughed, saying these were retaliatory claims and that the criminal conviction actually helped my case. He was right. 3 months later a judge threw out the lawsuit and ordered Michael and Brittany to pay my legal fees, $12,000 they definitely didn't have. I never saw that money and didn't expect to. But something shifted after that lawsuit was dismissed. The rage I'd been carrying started to fade, replaced by something quieter. Sadness, yes, but also acceptance. My son had made his choices. I'd made mine. We were both living with the consequences. Dr. Kim helped me work through the guilt that still lingered. She pointed out that I kept asking myself what I could have done differently, but I didn't create this situation, I responded to it. There's a difference. I said I should have seen the signs earlier. She said maybe, but even if I had, Michael was an adult who chose violence, and that wasn't something I caused or could have prevented by being a better mother. I was a good mother. He became a bad son. Those were separate facts. Slowly I started to believe her. Spring came and I started gardening again, something I'd avoided since the assault happened in my garden. The first time I knelt in the dirt where he'd broken my finger, I cried. But I stayed there, planted tomatoes, pulled weeds, reclaimed my space. Ruth introduced me to her book club. Linda visited twice more. I made new friends, careful ones, people who didn't know my story unless I chose to tell it. I went back to work and threw myself into my sales job. Got promoted to senior director in June. The raise was good. The distraction was better. My finger healed crooked. The doctor said they could re-break it and set it properly, but I declined. I wanted the reminder, wanted to look at my hand and remember the day I chose myself over his demands. In July I got an unexpected email from Michael sent through his therapist as a one-time communication. He wrote that he wasn't asking for forgiveness and knew he didn't deserve it, but he needed me to know he was getting help, real help. He'd been diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder and narcissistic tendencies. Learning about these things didn't excuse what he did, but it explained some of it. He said Brittany and he were divorced. She left when the money ran out, which probably told me everything I needed to know. He was working at a Best Buy now, living in a studio apartment, trying to rebuild his life from nothing. He thought about what he did to me every single day. He was sorry, not because he wanted something from me, just because it was true. He hoped I was okay, hoped I was happy, said I deserved to be. I read it 5 times and showed it to Dr. Kim. She asked how I felt about it. I said I didn't know, that part of me wanted to respond and part of me knew I shouldn't. She asked what I would say if I did respond. I thought about it and said I'd tell him I appreciated the apology but it didn't change anything, that I hoped he got better but I couldn't be part of his healing, that I forgave him for me, not for him. She suggested maybe I should say that. But I didn't. Instead I wrote a letter I never sent, poured everything into it, the hurt, the betrayal, the grief for the relationship we'd never have. Then I burned it in my fireplace and watched the words turn to ash. That felt like enough. In September I updated my will and left everything to a scholarship fund for single mothers going back to school. Michael wasn't mentioned. Grace reviewed the documents and asked if I was sure. I said completely that I was leaving my money to people who actually needed it and would appreciate it, and that wasn't him. I signed the papers feeling lighter than I had in months. October 15th, the 1-year anniversary of the assault, I did something deliberately. I hosted a dinner party with Ruth, Linda, and a few women from book club, including Amanda Chin, who'd become an unlikely friend. We ate pot roast, I made apple pie, we laughed and talked, and I didn't mention the significance of the date to anyone but Linda. Around Christmas I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Michael was dating someone new, a woman named Sarah who worked at the library and volunteered at an animal shelter. By all accounts kind and normal. I felt nothing about it. No jealousy that another woman was getting a version of him I never would, no hope that maybe she'd fix him. Just nothing. And that nothing felt like healing. In January, 2 years after the assault, I ran into Michael at the grocery store. Pure accident. We both froze in the produce section 10 feet apart. He looked different, less polished, humble maybe. His cart had store-brand items, budget-conscious choices. He said hi Mom quietly. I said his name. There was heavy, awkward silence. He said he was complying with the restraining order and could leave. I told him it was a public place and we were fine. More silence. He offered that I looked good. I thanked him and said he looked different. He said yeah, therapy and medication. Turns out he had a lot of undiagnosed mental health issues. Not an excuse, just information. I nodded, didn't know what to say. He apologized again, said he knew he'd said it before but he meant it, that what he did was unforgivable. I said yes it was. He flinched but nodded and said he hoped someday I could have some peace about it. I told him I already did and meant it. We stood there another moment, then he pushed his cart past me giving wide berth and disappeared down another aisle. That was the last time I saw him. Dr. Kim asked me in our next session how the encounter felt. I told her sad but not devastating, that I looked at him and saw a stranger who used to be my son and that was okay. She said that was significant growth. I explained that I'd spent so many years defining myself as Michael's mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for her son, and when that identity shattered, I had to figure out who I was without it. He asked who I was. I thought about it and said I'm Nancy Richardson. I survived poverty, built a career, owned my home, stood up for myself when someone I loved hurt me. I'm a friend, a sister, a survivor. Michael is part of my story but he's not the whole story anymore. That felt true in a way nothing else had in 2 years. Now at 54 my life looks different than I imagined. I'm not the mother with the successful son who takes care of her in old age. I'm not a grandmother to beautiful babies. I'm not part of a big happy family. But I have good friends, work I'm proud of, a home that's mine, hobbies I enjoy and peace most days. The scar on my finger reminds me that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, that boundaries matter even with family, that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. People ask sometimes if I regret pressing charges, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is no. My son broke my finger because I wouldn't give him money. That happened. It's a fact. And I chose to hold him accountable rather than enable him. Would our relationship have survived if I'd just signed those papers? Maybe. But what kind of relationship would it have been? One built on fear and obligation and financial manipulation. I'd rather have no relationship than that. Some people think that's cold, unforgiving. They say family should stick together no matter what. But I disagree. Family shouldn't mean tolerating abuse. Love shouldn't mean sacrificing your safety and dignity. I loved my son enough to raise him right. He chose to become someone else. That's on him, not me. And I loved myself enough to walk away when staying became dangerous. That's the lesson I'd want other mothers to learn from my story. You can love someone with your whole heart and still have to let them go. You can grieve the person you thought they were while protecting yourself from the person they actually are. It's not selfish. It's survival. Last month I got a card in the mail with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Michael's. Inside were just a few lines saying he was 3 years sober from anger, working full-time in a healthy relationship, volunteering with troubled youth. He was becoming someone he could be proud of. He didn't expect anything from me, just wanted me to know he was trying. He thanked me for not giving up on him by enabling him, said the hard love was the right love. I put the card in a drawer and haven't looked at it since. Maybe someday I'll want a relationship with him again. Maybe I won't. Either way is okay. Because I learned something important through all of this. I'm not responsible for his healing. I'm only responsible for mine. And I'm doing just fine. My name is Nancy Richardson. I'm 54 years old. My son broke my finger over money and I chose myself. That choice saved my life.